Hello, Mr. Miskew. I'm Jack Cobb, and today I'm here to talk about my second assignment, my assignment 2, called Cobblandia2. And I put a lot of effort into this assignment, and for explaining it, I am relying more on the video instead of actually commenting it, because my game is 2,000 lines long, more than 2,000 lines. So I did comment it, and I did explain each function, but I think the video is going to be a lot more useful in the sense that I can go through everything. It's a game that involves a huge variety of classes, all of which allow the game to function and run, and then it just has simply 4 lines at the bottom of actual main code, which I'll get onto later. It involves 4 files, obviously the program itself, a map text file, which is used in the world class, and then a Cobblandia2 saves file, which is used in the loading class. Also, if I open my file and I go on to my pictures, I have my Welcome to Cobblandia GIF file, and it's the picture that is used in the menu class and is vital for the game to run. Anyway, we're gonna be starting things off with the imports. I import tkinter as TK, and from tkinter I import pretty much everything. And this allows, me to create GUI, create a GUI and make the game look really nice. So I'm going to start things off with the hero class, which is the class that creates the hero object, so the player, the person, and also has many functions, all of which allow the game to run smoothly. The first function is the initiation function. So the object that is created later in another class is it sets the name, the money, the health, the current health, the left hand, and all the inventory slots, and a bunch of other stats and statistics. And then also creates the attack statistic and defense statistics. So this is where the player is made, the object's made. Next up, you have the new level function. It's really simple. If the player's experience is greater than 4,000 after a battle, then obviously the experience goes down to 0, your level goes up by 1, your health goes up by 10, so that's how you can gain more and more health. And then you have, just 4 other functions in the hero class, all of which pretty much perform the same thing, apart from they just return different strings, and this allows, the text to be displayed in the GUI, in the final GUI, and it's involving, displaying the statistics, the items, the inventory, and launch box. So that's the hero class. It's quite simple. Moving on, we have the goblin class, the vampire class, and the demon class, all of which are exactly the same, apart from the purpose of each is to create different objects. So if I click on the goblin class, for example, it has many different functions, all of which are the same as each one in demon class and the vampire class. Apart from, obviously, I switched the names and I switched the names of the variables. It starts off with the initiation function, create the actual goblin objects to fight, and then goes through, the starting menu function, so when you first fight them, the attack sequence function, the attack info function, which displays all the attack text and shows what's happening. The eat menu function, which allows the player to eat food whilst fighting. Lastly, the victory function, which gives the player experience and money if they beat the goblin, and the victory menu, which is the last thing that's displayed in the text when you beat them. Anyway, this is the goblin class. It's the same thing for the vampire class and the demon class. Variable or the functions are the same. It's just different objects. And next I have the weapons or armor storage class, which I call the weapons class, and it just it's just basically a storage unit for all my weapons in the game, and it makes it very organized and easy to see what's the content of my game. Much like the weapons class, I have my food class, which just has 8 food and not a lot of weapons from armor instead. And obviously it goes through the name of the food, the cost of the food, and then the strength. And for the weapons, obviously, I have the name, the position, the cost, the attack, and the defense. So that is that. Moving on, we have the shop class, which much like the hero class, unless apart from like, there's no initiation function, in the fact that it's just returning strings, which allow the text to be displayed in the GUI in the game. So for example, your starting menu, and then you got the weapons list, armor list, and food list. Next up, got the combat room, and this is like where you can train for experience. Obviously, but it's much like the shop in the fact that it just returns a string as the only function, and it's whenever you run into the combat trainer, which we'll see later on. Next up, you've got the menu class, which is the first sign of me using GUI, and actually uses one of my files. So it starts off with the initiate function, and the initiation of two variables is loading and is playing, which you can see me using down here in my main code, and I'll get onto later. And then I just go on and create all the tkinter objects, including the two buttons, play button and load button, and then the canvas screen, and then the picture, the photo image. And this line right here is really important because if I run, I'll show you, it does actually use my picture, and obviously the play button and load button. And this is incredibly important because if you want to run this program on your own computer, you're going to have to change this code because it shows the location of the picture, which is called welcome to Cobblandia.gif. In my computer, obviously, because it's in users 2019057, which is my student number, and pictures. Other than that, I get to choose, the font and the size and whether it's bold or not. And then I pack it afterwards through the use of sticky and northeast, southwest. And after my initiation function, I have my button click function, which changes these two variables up here, is playing and is loading, based on which button the player clicks, and then actually destroys the main loop afterwards, because there's no use of the GUI anymore. What's important to know about this class though is when you do run my game, and let's say you don't want to play at all, which does happen, you just click the X button, it does run into an error, but this error, it doesn't actually have an impact on my game because if I do click, for example, play, it does actually run into my actual game. And if I click load, for example, it will go into this, which will later on go into my actual game. So the error doesn't have actually doesn't have an impact at all. And it just means my game is the same. Anyway, we're moving out of the class, the menu class, and moving into the load saves class, which is kind of like the same thing. It's in fact the second. It's if you click the load button, and it's the second piece element of GUI in my code. And starts off with initiation function, obviously many different variables, and all of which are used to interpret my text file function, the saves text file function, through this line here, and it stores it in obviously a variable called self.previous saves. And then it goes through two counted loops. And what this does is it basically converts previous saves through the use of many different variables into a list at self.save list, and allows me to store all of the information in a list, which makes it very easily to be accessible. And I actually used a function in my tools class, my summative, the function that turns a string into a list through a divisor. Obviously the divisor is here and here, and it allows me to basically access my information through a list, which is a lot better than actually accessing it through a string. Anyway, after all this, I go through, the tkinter components and packing it in. So for example, I have the enter button, the user input, and just the text box or the display. And what's really neat is I use a counter loop here to keep adding each element of the self.saves list onto the actual the screen, and just makes it very organized and accessible, and allows the user to pick whichever save file they want to access. And then I just pack all my elements through the use of sticky. And then I have my button function, which is different to the buttons in my menu class. as what this does is whenever it's clicked, whenever the enter button is clicked, it just stores what is ever in the user input in a variable, and then if that user input is greater than the self counter, so that's like the amount of the amount of saves, or if it's less than 0, then it'll just say, that's not a valid entry, and it won't give an error. And then if it is a valid entry, then it'll just set the variable self.chosen load to the save list at that save number, which allows the player to load the save. So that's my load saves class, and moving on to my world class next. So we're running out of time here. I've got 4 more minutes, so I might create a second video just to keep explaining this game anyway. So I start off my initiation function, my world class, and obviously this class is the class it ticks. So if I'm going to show you my game now, here's the menu class, and let's say I want to play. I'm going to click load just for the sake of showing you. Here's the load class. Here's the enter button. Here's the display, and I can type in whatever number. For example, I can type 5 or something and enter it in, and then it will just pop up. This is the world class. This is the actual game. This is where everything happens. So there we go. So we have initiation of objects. For example, my hero class or my hero object. This is the object that is mainly used the entire game because it's the one that the player is, and it's basically just a big gigantic list. It's just an object that needs a bunch of lists and variables and stuff. And then I create my shop object and my combat room object. So we're moving on to the initialization of variables, and in my world class I use many different variables, something like 9, and they're just like, they act as checkers and allow the game to run based on what the player is doing. So for example, the shop will never pop up if this is equal to false, but if you're next to a shopkeeper, for example, then it will pop to true, and it will allow the person to access the shop. Next up, we have the loaded and saved information. So remember when I said that there's two checkers or variables in the menu class, the is playing variable and the is loading. Well, obviously it checks if is playing is false, or it hasn't been changed. And what it does is, if it's not an empty load, it just loads in every single element that was saved in the list, depending on what the player chose. The one thing I haven't been able to do is save the inventory or the lunchbox, because for me that requires a lot of time. But I haven't been able to save, the experience, the level, the attack, the defense, the actual items that are equipped, the name, the health, and the money, which are the main components of the game. So if I really wanted, I could have just really dug on and just allowed it to save the inventory, but it would take a lot of time. So yeah, that's basically the loading save function, or it's actually an if statement, I guess. But anyway, I'll continue with the initiation function. So here it creates the the initial position of the player and stores it in the first pixel available, pretty much. And then it goes on to the reading the map file. So it reads the map, the file right here, and allows that to be accessed, and then creates a list of all the data, which is pretty cool. And we have obviously the creation of ticking components, and I have many buttons for many different uses, which I'll get onto later in my next function. But also creates the canvas, the text file, the user input, and then goes through obviously packing it all in through a variety of different uses of row span, column span, rows and columns, and things like that. Anyways, that's my initiation function. Rather similar to the other two GUI elements. But now, in my next video, I'm going to move on to the button function and start going through the rest of my code. Thank you.